Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we're going to show you how you can finish your quilts at home using the elusive feather design. And today I'm going to be using another stencil by Line Stencils by Hancy Creations. I have tried to quilt feathers with disastrous results. Taken classes, I've done the sketching, I've done everything that one says you are supposed to do in order to be able to master feathers, and I could never do it. And then I found this stencil, and I think it works for me for two reasons, because I was able to instantly quilt a perfect feather with it the first time I tried it. And I think it works because, one, you have lines to follow. So you're not off in no man's land trying to get that perfect little arc, and then you try to go in the other direction, and all of a sudden you can't because you got one's half down but not the other. And it combines the feather with the swirl, which is one of the easier designs to get down. If you haven't gotten it down yet, we've got another video on an overall swirl that you can start with first. So this one's really neat as it comes in, and you're going to do your swirl first. And then your mind has to work for a little bit, and you're going to follow the lines. You're going to do your feather, and then you get to relax your brain a little bit and do a design that's a little bit more familiar. And then you're going to come out, do your feather again, then relax your brain a little bit more and do another swirl before you have to work a little bit harder on it. It's got lots of great registration marks that you can use to make sure that everything is lined up, and they've already worked it so that it looks a little offset when you're working on it. So that's what we're going to do today, and maybe you guys can finally tackle feathers too. In order to do this, you obviously are going to need the stencil. We've got everything you need over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. I highly recommend you have quilting gloves, and then you cannot use these stencils without the quilt pounce pad. You can get these in multiple colors. We have white, blue, and pink. You want to choose something that's going to contrast with the fabric. So if you're doing like a baby boy quilt in blue and green and white, you're going to want some pink because that's going to contrast with everything that you have. There's a white version that we have that irons off. So if you're doing a really dark quilt, you can use that and then just iron the marks away when you're done. Or if you're using any of the pigments, you don't want to iron them because that will heat set the pigment, but you can usually just brush it off or wash it before you give it to anybody. We have a whole video using these and how to fill this up and prime your pounce. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to pop this off. It's like one of the banks that you had when you were a kid. You're going to fill it all the way up to the top with the chalk powder that comes with it. Then with the plastic backing on the bottom, you're going to bang it really hard against your desk 50 times. Then you're going to repeat that process when you're filling it for the first time. Fill it all the way up, and then put the top back on and bang it again 50 more times. And then that will get your pounce pad fully saturated. It should look like this if it's going to work. And the chalk pad that goes with it, when they demonstrate with this stuff, it shows they use it constantly for an entire long weekend, and that's enough to go through it so it lasts a long, long time. Whenever you're getting light on this, just give it another bang, and then it'll start to push some more chalk onto your pounce pad, and you'll be able to swipe again. So number one problem, if you're not getting any chalk down, it means you didn't prime it properly, so check that out first. All right, so I've already made my test sandwich here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up real close to the edge here. So I've got this nice and even with the bottom, and then I've got it so that the edges of my feather are going right out to the edges of my fabric. And I'm actually going to turn this so it'll be easier to swipe that way. What I do is I hold it in place at the bottom with my fingertips, and then you just swipe up. And if you want, you can swipe a couple of times just to make sure it goes through. But when you're ready, I just set it back in its tray, and without moving it too much, I'm just going to pull it up to make sure that that has transferred through. I can see it pretty well. I'm going to check a couple other areas. Yeah, it's doing okay. Might need a little bit more there. Do a little bit more at these edges. And let's peel it off. Oh, very nice. So we can see that really easily on here, and it's showing up good on camera too, which means it's really clear here. I've got a little bit of double vision lines from where the stencil moved a little bit, but no big deal. They're going to go away at the end. You just got to pick one of them to follow. So we got a registration mark here, and then we also have the registration mark here by where that center was. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line that up here, and then along the bottom as well. And what that does is the start of this curve here, get some of the chalk off so you can see it a little better, is going to line right up where this feather left off. So that way it'll just continue on going as if there were no issues whatsoever. And you did it all freehand. Now this one lines up pretty well so that the feather is kind of ending right at the edge of my fat quarter. If it didn't, just quilt right on off the edge and then pick it right back up, and that's fine too, because no one's going to see the edge of your quilt. You're going to cut it off, so just do what you need to do to continue that design. All right, so I quilted one whole bit. You can see it's going to come in here, stop, and then continue right on. So we're going to give this a try now on our sewing machine. So I've got my machiner's quilting gloves on. That helps me move the fabric pretty easily without too much wrist or shoulder strain. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to lay it down in my lap so that this part is not scraping against my body, because I don't want that chalk to rub off against me. So I want it to be kind of sitting up a little bit as I do it. Now, if you were doing this for real, you would want to bring your thread to the bottom and then pull your bobbin thread up to the top like this, so that way it wouldn't get a lot of gobbledygook underneath there. Since this is a sample, I'm just going to kind of let it be. All right, so normally when I quilt, I'm going to put my hands right here, and I'm just going to kind of sew in between my fingers and try to move my hands as little as possible. And when I do, you've got to fully lift them up instead of drag, or you're going to drag all that chalk around, which you don't want to do. So first, I'm just going to focus in on getting this spiral down. And again, normally I would hold my hands like this. I'm going to hold them a little offset so you guys can see a little bit easier what's going on. But normally I would put my hands like this, so that's how you should try and practice at home. So I normally reduce the speed on my machine so I can't go super fast. That way I can kind of just put the pedal down and I'm able to get nice and even stitches. When you get to that point, pause for a second and then work your way out. That way you don't end up with some huge stitches at the point. That can happen. If you need to change your hands and stop for a second, the points are good places to do it too, because it's real easy, because you're going to have to change directions coming out of it rather than the middle of a curve where it can look a little jerky. All right, so I'm going to readjust my hands. I always stitch a couple of stitches in place at a point if I'm starting off. That way we don't end up with like a gigantic stitch coming out, because that's really obvious and not something you want to do. All right, so we're going to change directions at that point. And we're going to come around. And then once we come around, we're going to start those feathers, but it's not scary because you got some lines to follow, and you just have to do a couple of them, and then you're going to be back at your swirl again. All right, so here we go. We're just quilting a little curve, coming into the point. If you need to stop, the point is the time to do it. So if you've got to reposition your hands, we haven't done that in a little bit, now's the time to do it. All right, so you're going to follow the line, and we're going to quilt that other feather swoop. When you're feeling a little bit more confident, you can go a little quicker. All right, change directions at that point and do a little swoop. Got the point. One more feather swoop, and then we get to kind of change directions, give our minds a little break, and just do a little swirl. So here we go. Now we're back in swirl territory. All right, now's a good time. I need to reposition my hands because I'm getting to where I can't control it as easily anymore. So I'm going to reposition and get them closer to where I can handle it a little bit better. And then I'm just gonna, I know I can do a swirl. That is one of my designs that I got down. So I'm gonna go a little bit faster for this section. Machine's going a little faster, and so am I. All right, we got one more point before we have to start doing those curves. So if you need to stop and reposition, now's the time. All righty, here we go. Time for some more feathers. This one is a little bit longer one. Notice I'm going a little bit slower, but I'm still trying to keep those stitch length even. That's the goal. Keep that stitches nice and even. Just follow the lines. Take a break when you get to the points of those feathers if you have to. either to kind of get your bearings, see where you're going next, or just to reposition your hands. All right, time for me to reposition hands again. I was losing some control. My feather didn't look as good as it should. And if you were using matching thread, I obviously am not, so you guys can see it at home, but if you were using matching thread, any imperfections are gonna get hidden, especially once you wash it for that first time. All right, so I've gotten to another little swoop there. I probably should have stopped and repositioned back here, but that's okay. We made it around. It's gonna look all right. So now we're going to go again. This is the longest stretch of feathers you're gonna have is on this part of the stencil, but we're almost through, and then we're gonna have some curves again. There are some nice little swirls. All right, so I've got to the first point in my next swirl, so now's a great time to reposition those hands. And we're gonna finish that swirl up, and then we are almost done with the first pass of that stencil, and then the connecting part happens. Okay, I'm gonna slow down again for those feathers because I don't know those as well as I do my swirls. Although I do find usually that once you do feel comfortable enough to go a little bit faster, your curves do end up being a lot smoother. So just practice a few times first on some fat quarters like this, and then make a go for it. All right, I have made it through that first section of feather. It is looking really good. I'm really happy with this. So now I'm going to go ahead and quilt the second bit of it that I stenciled on there, and just go straight off the edge of the sample piece that we have here. All right, so I've quilted that first path, and are they perfect? No. Does it matter? Absolutely not. If you had done this, or if I had done this in matching thread, you would just see the texture. You would not see the little bobbles where they got off a little bit. And even so, you can just take your gloves and wipe it off, and you can't even tell that I was off of that line at all. It just looks like I created this beautiful design from scratch in my mind only, but I use a stencil in order to be able to create it. Now, you don't want to remove these marks here, the registration marks, because we're going to use that to line up the second bit. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And then you guys can go quilt feathers too and master them the way I thought I never could until I discovered this stencil. So if you watched our overall swirl video, then you'll see how the stencils kind of offset a little bit. And that way where it comes in a little bit here, the next one will come in and fill this in a little bit better. So what you want to do is line up your stencil so that this little bit comes in and matches right here. And then if you kind of peek up and look, you can see that there isn't any overlap with that. And then you kind of want to peek up on this side, and you can see that they all just kind of nest in there just perfectly, which is fabulous. So now I'm going to take it and I'm just going to swipe it across, just like we did the first time. And you can see everything just nests in real nicely there. So then I can take it and I can fill it in a little bit over here. So I can line up. Here's our registration mark. So I can line those up. And then I'm just gonna quilt right off my edge in order to get it started. As you can see, it doesn't quite go all the way down. So now that's all connected. Now we're gonna do the same thing over here. We're gonna match the stencil line up, a little registration, get those little bullet marks lined up, double check that we're not overlapping anything, which we're not. Go ahead and swipe. And now it matches up perfectly over there as well. So now all you have to do is quilt it one more time and create that really pretty line that you have going on, and they'll be nice and intertwined, which is also great because if you do make a little bit of mistake, it's not like it's obvious because the exact same swirl is right next to it. It's offset a little bit. Whereas here it's here, and then it's going to be, whereas right here, it's right there, and then it's up a little bit further over here. So you do make a little bit of mistake, you get off a little bit, no big deal, nobody knows. So I'm going to quilt this up real quick, and then we're done. So I just love, love, love this stencil. It is so pretty. It's got the combination of that swirl and the feather. And in the second half of it, I started going a lot faster because I was getting more comfortable with it as I was going along, and my curves started getting a little better as we were going there. So as you go a little faster, your curves will get a little smoother. Where I started to screw up was when I started to let my mind wander. So here you can see I like crossed over my lines a little bit. What I do when I'm quilting like in real life and not on camera for a tutorial is I put in some headphones and I listen to an audiobook. And what that does is it takes the critical part of my brain and occupies it, so I can just focus on what I'm doing in that moment and not the mistake I made 5 minutes ago or what I need to do to get dinner ready. That's when you start to screw up on stuff. So if you can occupy that critical part of your brain with an audiobook or just listening to a show on Netflix, that's a really good thing to do. Don't do an action movie because you're going to be looking up, or, you know, a juicy romance. Those types of things, not great for quilting. But any type of series or some book that you can just pop in and listen to what's happening next, that's great to help improve your quilting. Again, really love this. You can get the swirl. We're linking it down below in the video description, so that way you can give it a go and give it a try at home and do feathers on your quilt. My plan for this is I want to do this on a king size quilt that I have had unfinished for years. And my thought and my goal always with this is to be able to do this eventually without the stencil. You get the stencil to develop the muscle memory you need to do the stitch on your own without needing the guidelines anymore. And so I'm going to just use this entire stencil across my entire king size quilt top, and my hope is that by the end of it I'll have the muscle memory down to where I don't need the stencil anymore. But if you have to mark it every single time to get results like this, there are worse things in the world, let me tell you. So I'm totally good with this. If I would have used matching thread, you wouldn't even see little bits where it's not absolutely perfect. It would just be texture, especially once it's been washed and it gets a little crinkly. So hands down, my favorite stencil from Full Line Stencil and Handsy Creations. I love it. It is stencil number 50003. And again, we've got that over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com along with everything else you need to give this a go. Just practice on some fat quarters until you feel like you're ready to give it a go on a quilt. And again, a great way to keep these free video tutorials coming is if you see something and you want to give it a try, get it from us, and that helps us be able to bring you these free tutorials. If you like this, leave a comment below. Let me know what else you want to see. We've been getting lots of comments on our free motion quilting videos lately, so we're planning a whole lot more of them because we know that you guys like them. So if you like something, let me know so that we can do more of it to get you guys inspired to take your quilting to that next level. Thanks so much, and until next time, happy quilting.